Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another crypto charged super stream from wherever you guys are tuning in from today. Really had a great time chatting with you guys yesterday, going over Casper news. So we talked a lot about, first of all, Kraken listing. We talked a lot about the fundamentals, the roadmap, AI-based tools. We really spent a lot of time diving into the fundamentals as well as a really big chart session yesterday. So if you guys didn't get the opportunity to check out yesterday's super stream live, you guys can go watch it now on YouTube. It's about an hour and 40, but because it's now published, you guys can skip through, speed it up, slow it down, whatever you guys prefer. But I'd recommend you guys check it out, whether you're interested in Casper or not. We also had a really big charting session on the back end, answered a lot of questions live, and I plan on doing something similar today. So today we are going to be talking about XRP, talking a little about the ETF news, piece of regulatory news for maybe some of you guys who don't keep your finger on the pulse as much as you'd like to. Talking about X402 as well with XRP, but I'm going to be mindful not to give you guys the lecture on the fundamentals of X402 and try to be more focused on how specifically those apply to the XRPL and why it makes XRPL a good candidate for these types of agentic services. We're going to take a look at the charts. Happy to take your guys' questions and take a look at any charts that you guys want to take a look at. So looking forward to getting into all of that, but you guys needed to know that we come from cryptocharge.com. Go live Monday through Friday over there. We look at the equity markets, we look at the crypto markets, commodities, been paying very close attention to the oil, dollar, 10-year. A lot of our members are in the real estate space already, investors of a variety of different ways. So we try to give everybody the snapshot they need and not try to just make it a crypto degen rabbit hole. So really enjoying our program. You guys get access to Discord, Learning Center, written summaries, little macro summaries for those of you guys who just want to get a pulse on what's happening big picture, technical expectations, fundamental macro expectations. You guys get 30 days free with code YouTube. So please, guys, check it out with code YouTube for 30 days free, plus 50% off if you guys decide to stick after that. So really no downside for you guys. You get to get in the Discord, ask me questions, really feel it out and see if it's a good fit. I've tried to do 7 days before. It's certainly not enough time to really get a feel for it. Work's busy, life's busy. So I want to make sure you guys have that time. So please come check it out there. Excited to get into today's topics. I wanted to really peel out with some ETF news, and we're going to read a little bit through here on XRP Insight specifically as to kind of how ETFs work. They're not super complex. Most of you guys probably understand what an ETF is, but it is important for those of you guys who see these headlines to know how to differentiate between, is a giant institution buying this much XRP, or, are users buying spot XRP and holding it on those traditional investment accounts. It can get a little bit money for those of you guys who are not familiar. So we're gonna take a look at a few dashboards here. We're gonna take a look at some other stuff, like I said, fundamentally, but I want to start with the ETF because I think the big headline that we saw over the last day and a half or so was like 5.2 million or something like that in inflows from Franklin Templeton XRP ETF, which is not a small number, right? It means that there was a pretty large amount of purchasing from retail within their traditional brokerage accounts. So we're going to take a look at some of what the other major ETFs are doing as well. But before we do that, I think it's important that we take a look at this tab here from XRP ETF guide. I'm going to show you guys a resource after this that's much more robust and complex for those of you guys who care a lot about the stats, but this is a pretty clean, lightweight app, and you can use this as a web app as well. So if you guys are curious about daily ETF inflows, you just want to have that little stat ready to go there. It is a pretty clean little web app for what it is. I think that it does exactly what it's designed to do at a very high level. So let's read a little bit here. So this is the XRP ETF tracker and complete 2026 guide. You guys can go through and read any of this yourself. I think it's very clean and plain language in here, but let's read first and foremost what is an XRP ETF. It's an exchange traded fund that holds actual XRP tokens in secure custody and trades on traditional stock exchanges like the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. Think of it like a gold ETF. You don't hold gold bars in your house, but you own a share of gold held in a vault. Similarly, XRP ETFs hold XRP in institutional custody, Coinbase custody, or BitGo. If you guys are not familiar with BitGo, they are also recently listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Not that it's an ETF. They're a custody solution. Would highly recommend if you guys are looking for something that's very like granular intrinsic value, but doesn't have that sexiness of what you're going to see with just ETFs that trade within those funds. I digress. And each share represents a proportional claim of those holdings. So there's going to be three terms in here as well that you guys do need to be aware of. ETF is going to be an exchange traded fund. This is going to be like Bitwise, Canary, Franklin Templeton. Then you have ETPs, which are exchange traded products. This is also something that is used in Europe. An umbrella term that includes ETFs. 21 shares uses the term TOXR, but functionally for investors, it trades exactly like an ETF. And then you have trust, which is what Grayscale still uses for a lot of their products. Originally launched as a private trust and later converted to an ETF structure. It now trades on public exchanges just like others. I want to say they have a couple lingering trusts as well, but Grayscale Trust was one of the most interesting products that people were interested in trading because sometimes they'd be trading at a discount or a premium to the actual spot price. So, you know, you could get your teeth kicked in by buying the ETF at the trust at the wrong price, or you could see that there's horrible lack of parity in the market and you're getting a really good deal if you can stomach the short-term volatility. Moving on here, you guys can also take a look through the different 7 XRP ETFs available. You can take a look through the different fee structures in there. Franklin Templeton right now is offering what it looks like to be the absolute best fee. You can see the custodians associated with it. AUM is assets under management, so it tells you the total amount of money that particular fund manages collectively. And then to the right of that, it tells you the amount of XRP. Of course, that can change, you know, day by day. This is a dynamic chart from what I understand, so it should change on a regular basis. We also read a little bit lower here because some of this stuff is, you know, just reading materials for you guys who are curious about the every little detail of each exchange. XRP ETF inflows and outflows. Since their launch, XRP ETFs have seen historical demand. US spot XRP ETFs crossed over 1 billion asset under management milestone in 2026 and peaked above 1.28 billion in May, fueled by dozens of consecutive days of positive price action. You guys can also read down here like a different way of thinking about or breaking down ETF fees, the expense ratios of each one of these. So you think about it, $19 a year on 10K for Franklin Templeton. That's a much easier mathematical equation for most people to like wrap their heads around. A lot of these other ETFs are taking much bigger fees. What you'll notice here though is that a lot of these other ETFs are not, you know, giant conglomerates in the space or behemoths in the space that have already commandeered a huge amount of the amount of volume that's done in these like traditional brokerage accounts. So they're likely offering something that will increase in rate. I believe that it will. I think that they're going to charge more. I think they're trying to cut the bottom out of the market right now because they have the ability to do so, right? They can bleed out like that. Not 21 shares or Bitwise or Grayscale doesn't have, you know, a nice arm of that, but they can't sit on those types of, you know, losses or be willing to cut out the bottom of the market without having, you know, the safeguard and other types of investments making up for it, right? That's why Franklin Templeton's able to do what they're doing here. Moving on here, we also have in the same portal here under XRP Insights, you guys can see for XRP Radar. This is a very important, very simple infographic that a lot of people do not ever like even think about touching, but it really tells you a lot about, first of all, how much is really held by Ripple in custody in their escrow, because that's kind of a number that I think people have embellished a lot. They're like, oh, Ripple has over 50% of all XRP in their escrow and they're going to dump on us, or they've been dumping on us. But then you look at kind of the actual breakdown of where all 100 billion XRP lives. You guys can see that Ripple escrow is actually 32%. So it's actually quite a bit less. You look at some of the other major figures in here. Whales and cold storage hold about 17%. Exchange is about 15% of XRP sits on exchanges, 11% on institutional and over-the-counter orders. Retail holds about 10%. Founders about 5%. Ripple operations 4.7%. It's a big number, but it's really not as big of a number as I think people really drum it up to be. ETFs about 1% of total XRP allocation. Lost or inaccessible is 0.5%, and that number can change because although it's very difficult, you can retrieve assets from a cold storage wallet. It's very expensive. There's no guarantees, and you generally have to find somebody that has the experience and equipment to do it. And even then, you know, they're going to charge an upfront fee and then, you know, a very large recovery fee. So sometimes it's not worth the headache there. And a lot of these other ones really start to become very, very small. You see DeFi and AMM only 0.3% right now, corporate treasury 0.4%. But they're also showing one other figure here, which is tokenized RWA, the amount of volume that's being tokenized as real world assets, right around 4.4 billion. So I'd recommend you guys at least bookmark this page so you guys have a resource to check in on, especially if you guys are XRP holders. Curious about learning more about XRP. Very easy resource that I think is very cleanly laid out that gives you all the stats that you need. This is the last page on XRP Insights that tells you about the daily volume. So you can see the XRP ETFs here by daily volume. Obviously shows you the market's closed right now. It has a ticker roll down or roll over there to when the next one starts. But it'll show you by ETF what that daily volume would look like. So you saw 4.35 million from Bitwise today, 2.4 from Franklin Templeton today, Canary, 800,000. And then it goes down from there, and obviously 21 shares and Rex Osprey not seeing a lot of volume. But yesterday was tremendously more. Franklin Templeton siphoned most of that volume. You can also toggle over here to the only index fund, which is Bitwise 10 crypto index, which they're also including in these figures here. So I think these are really good resources for you guys to have. It doesn't, mean that you have to stare at these every day to be a good investor, a good steward of your money. But when you guys are hearing about the ETF conversations, you guys should probably kind of really get a better handle on like what that volume actually looks like. More granularly, before we take a look at some of the other topics that are XRP related, and finishing off this topic here around ETFs, Blockworks has a really excellent dashboard that you guys can utilize for free. They obviously offer paid plans where you guys can see more specific pieces of data. But for those of you guys who are just looking for base level information, this is a very easy and clean dashboard to interact with. On the left side here, you can see crypto ETFs. So it's showing you all the ETFs. Here's my only stupid little gripe with this. And some exchanges still do this. You can see up here when they show you by system, it's still labeled Ripple. And that's not correct. But when you look down here, like all of the tickers are correct and the ETPs or ETFs are labeled correctly. So you guys can sort by whatever you want. You can also look at Bitcoin ETFs. You can look at Ethereum ETFs. On the left side here, there's a lot of other resources for liquid staking. Those of you guys are interested in DeFi. But again, just even as a base level ETF tracker, and you're even curious just about general ETF inflow and outflow, this is a great resource for you guys to bookmark. So I'd recommend you guys start a folder on your desktop if you guys haven't already, and make sure you guys have quick points of research that you guys can access. All right. Let's talk about the AI side of things, because I think that it's maybe getting a little exhaustive just because it's been a narrative that's exploded so heavily in the last several months. But we should understand how each network or each platform or each token that we want to hold, and tend to use as an investment vehicle, how are they applying that, right? How are they being competitive with it? What are they doing differently? What sets them apart? What makes them more qualified than others to execute X402? Why should you choose Casper? Why should you choose XRPL? Those are questions that we shouldn't be combative about, but be honest and say, are we really in a platform that's offering something competitive? Is it cheaper? Is it faster? Is it more secure? So as far as what X402 is, I'm not going to really hammer you guys too much with this here. We're going to roll right into this one green quote because I talked a lot about X402 yesterday. Membership is a context for everything. Ripple is shipped around it. The XRPL AI starter kit released in June, packaging, wallet integration, documentation servers, and payment tutorials for agent developers. The XRPL AI hub launched by Ripple, backed by T54.ai. Support for agent payments in both XRP and the RLUSD stablecoin, and a slot amongst the 30 plus launch partners of MasterCard's own agent payment networks. I think it's important that we are able to utilize RLUSD in this capacity through agentic services. That is one thing that I think already sets them apart, is a native stablecoin. Moving on here, talking about the audit, what 1.4 million transaction ways, which is what they have exceeded, 1.4 million transactions. XRPL transaction fees are fixed at near 0.0002, very cheap. And this has always been the main proposition value of XRP, is that it costs practically nothing. It costs a drop of XRP for most transactions, objects, etc. 1,400,000 agentic transactions therefore generated an order of $280 in total network fees, a number that not gotcha by measurement, but it says the agentic activity on XRPL to date is economically a rounding error in the transaction count on chain. Transactions cost nothing is a metric that measures enthusiasm, and testing is at least as much as commerce. The honest description is that the XRPL has proven the pipes work, not that anything economically significantly flows through them yet. So it shows that you have a proof of concept, right? You have true proof of concept that's also being executed in a live environment. Fee schedules will change as adoption, really sets in. And we've also, I know a lot of you guys are into Teo, which is essentially a marketplace, that dynamically changes pricing and overall rankings of certain services, whether you want to say, generate an image or, collect certain pricing data, whatever it is. You can basically shop a marketplace or have your agentic service shop those marketplaces, give them parameters, and I'm willing to take a lesser level of certainty for a faster reward, or I'm only willing to pay this much. I think that the amount of volume that's been extracted from a dollar perspective is kind of irrelevant. And I think that this particular article lays it out quite nicely. The case that the position is still right. Standard tables are cheap options on large futures. Ripple's premier membership cost engineering attention and puts XRP and RLUSD inside the specification process of a payment standard that AWS, Amazon Web Services, Google, Visa, MasterCard consider worth governing. If machine-to-machine commerce becomes a fraction of what its backers project, the chains and assets wired into the standard from the beginning inherit distribution no retrofit can buy, and the MasterCard launch partner slot is exactly that wiring. Moving on here to our next piece. Stablecoin sitting in the middle. The economics of a stablecoin in machine commerce are the economics every issuer already understands at higher frequency. Each RLUSD stablecoin associated with the XRPL that settles agent payments is float, reserves earning treasury yield for the issuer, and agentic flows having property consumer flows lacks. Balances that never sleep. A human controlled stablecoin sit idle between purchases, and agent working balances turns over continuously, but the aggregate flow across a fleet of funded agents is persistent, programmatic, and grows with the category mechanically. RLUSD presence is the XRP implementation in whatever flow the MasterCard partnership eventually routes, is Ripple's bid for a share and is a better bid than the transaction count suggests, because the enterprise agents Ripple's institutional relationships reach will care about exactly the things RLUSD was chartered to offer: a regulated issuer, bank grade reserves, and a compliance posture that a corporate treasury can sign off on. So you're offering, I think, a higher level of just packaged services, right? We're a little bit closer to a SaaS here because of the stablecoin integration. So very cheap, very fast, very consistent, and you also have a lot of uptime on XRPL. That's one huge benefit of XRP being as old as dirt. It's one of the older tokens that's been on exchange. It's had incredible uptime. It's had proven performance, and I think that's really what does set this apart as an L1 compared to other L1s, especially established L1s, is the amount of uptime and time on market. And then we even look at the implementations of what we've seen with XRP. They were actually not the very first to have native NFT offerings in marketplaces. That was something that was added, I would say, well after some of the other newer L1s to kind of come out swinging with that. But the implementations we have seen on XRPL, although have been slower, have been very consistent and very high quality. So I think that the groundwork was laid here, and I'm very impressed with that. Last piece here before we move on. There is one construction under which the token does capture something: XRP as the bridge and liquidity asset when agents transact across currencies using the ledger's native exchange, which is the on-ledger version of the company's oldest thesis and carries the oldest caveat. It requires agents to hold and route through a volatile asset when a stable one is available, and a behavior no current X402 flow exhibits anywhere. It's just an incredibly high level of efficiency, making sure that balances do not need to continuously settle. XRP is the bridge, provides near instant finality, very high deterministic finality. Is a very good candidate for X402. And again, I own several projects that are focused on this right now, and I don't think that it's a single chain future. I think this is something that really every major L1 needs to consider as a part of their major tech stack if they want to be competitive. Moving on here to the AI Hub, just so you guys can take a quick look at what this looks like. This is associated with those transactions I just discussed there. You guys can see a live dashboard of the amount of XRP that's been settled. So it's only like 4,500 XRP, which again, we're charging a very tiny amount of XRP per transaction. RLUSD settled just like $1,900. Transactions 1.4, creeping up on 1.5 million, and there's over 130 merchants that you can get interact with. So remember that we're also looking at a very small new marketplace. If you look down further, you guys can click into some of the most recent transactions. You can see some of the major participants out here in the directory. We're not going to go through each of these, but again, this is a great resource for you guys to consider. Wanted to talk about something on the regulatory front, and then we're gonna get into the chart. So if you guys have things that you guys are curious about, you guys are interested in seeing some charts on the show, please let me know what you guys would like to see, because I'm happy to cover any of those topics. So we have a couple things left here, and then we're going to get right into that. So this is not brand new. This is from the top of this month. We're obviously on July 23 now. This is from July 6. But this is the press release from Ripple. Ripple receives full MiCA CASP authorization in Europe. Read very briefly here, and you guys can see only two little quotes. So Don't hold your breath here. The authorization follows a preliminary approval announced in June of 2026 and confirms Ripple as a full MiCA compliant with its end-to-end regulated crypto payment product now available to financial institutions, corporates, and businesses around 30 countries and European economic areas. Alongside its EU EMI license, Ripple's CASP approval makes it one of a small number of digital asset firms to have full authorization under MiCA. Sorry, guys, did not get enough sleep last night. Adding to the global portfolio to more than 75 regulatory licenses. Absolutely massive. And then this is our last major story, and we're going to get into those charts. This is something maybe you guys did read about today. Maybe you guys hadn't read about it yet. But I think this article does a pretty decent job of breaking down what it actually means. And it's not what some influencers and creators are just drumming up, and they're like, oh, it's a spend XRP directly from your debit card with no consequences. It's not an accurate description, although it is a cool product. So let's skip down here to what the card actually is. A Red Dot Pay user with XRP does not load the card by selling coins. They pledge the XRP as collateral into Red Dot Pay's system, and against that pledge, the platform extends a credit line of credit at a 50% loan to value ratio. $1,000 of XRP unlocks $500 of spending power. The credit is denominated and settled in RLUSD, Ripple's dollar stablecoin, where settlement is executed on the XRP ledger before the money reaches the Visa rails, where it spends like any other card balance at any merchant. So there are layers to this, right? Like there's still underlying mechanics that are, taking the XRP, leveraging it, issuing a line of credit, and then available to spend in person, right? Which is still cool. It's much further than we were several years ago. The half of the marketing that carries, reading down a little bit lower here, the Red Dot Pay card is the first mass market consumer product that routes RLUSD settlement through the XRP ledger itself. Every credit draw and on ledger transaction, which makes it a distribution event for certain home chain in precisely the dimension, ordinary payment volume, where the ledger's activity metrics have chronically under delivered. Half it doesn't. Reading down here, this last little piece. Actually, this is our last little piece. I'm not lying here. At what threshold does it liquidate? Selling the pledge XRP into a falling market to close the line. What notice does a user in one of those 100 countries get? On what timeline and what language agreement? None of this is disclosed at the launch materials, and none of its exotic pessimism. Agree with that. It is an operating manual of every collateralized lending product ever built. So I'm certainly not a person who's anti-lending. I'm not a person who is thinking that consumers are not smart enough to handle this kind of product. A lot of people are not, though. And even when people are given the paperwork, think about the number of people that have bought a home, taken out a student home loan, right? And they're like, oh, I didn't know, I had no idea that this would be what I have to pay back. Okay, well, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's this enormous truth in lending disclosure that you have to sign. Like you have to sign page by page when you sign a loan, and there's a truth in lending there at the bottom. You have to read it. So most people are aware. They just choose to kind of be ignorant to that. So I think that for a lot of people with the intention of just making this an easy bridge between utilizing their XRP and trying to spend it, it can get a little bit messy. I would recommend that if anyone does want to get involved with this type of product, take out a very small loan to value. Try to stay well under their threshold. You want to make sure that you have enough of a buffer room so that if the market vacillates, you're not at risk of liquidating a much larger amount of XRP, because really think about it, that line of credit is also interest bearing, right? So I think that there's lots of little things that people have to consider, that the card itself doesn't take away all of the other things that you would have like in a DeFi platform, right? If you were to go into a Morphle vault, you were to go into Figure, it doesn't take away all of those components. All it does is once you have extended, or you've had the line of credit extended, allows you to use that physical card at merchants, which is reducing the step, but does not negate those previous mechanics. Okay. We're going to get into the charts here, but I want to make sure if we have any comments that are relevant that we address those. Appreciate you too, Mark. Thank you. Can we chart XLM? Definitely. Let's start with XLM. I think that's a good place to start. So let's move into XLM here, and XLM and ONDO are showing very similar behavior. They're two that are really, really strong structurally right now. I don't own any XLM at the moment. I do own XRP. I do own ONDO, but I do recognize when there is just very clear chart patterns that are being displayed amongst multiple assets, and those are the structural clues that help us better understand where the actual opportunity lies. So with XLM and Stellar here, and I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday as well, but it's a big asset. A lot of people care a lot about XLM, And it's been on everyone's radar because Jeb and Caleb co-created both XRPL and XLM Stellar Network. So it's a very easy thing to get involved with. When you look at the main pivot zone or point of control that runs through this entire chart, somewhere between like 14 and 17 cents has been a crucial zone for XLM for years. All the way back here, we can see the support that was built from this flag in 2018 before you lost it, treated as resistance, lots of contention here in 2020, treated as multiple support bounces over here in 2022. You look at these two tests in here, major resistance, get a huge breakout here, looks just like the XRP breakout. You know, you create some decent higher low in here, didn't fully satiate. And you guys can see what happened over in here when we broke down, right? You lost that super important level, but what you did is you satiated this breakout. So these previous tops in here should have been back tested. They were not back tested, and they were properly back tested here from February of 2026 all the way through May of 26. That's exactly what I would hope for. That's really just a perfect scenario as far as macro rebalancing, especially when we know that this level has mattered since 2018. So if we were to kind of just back this out and refine this a little bit here, just as far as what's in front of us, what we're seeing right now is this base that's held super cleanly. You have the breakout like we discussed, and this flag that's been developing has been developing on top of that broken level. We're also seeing the magenta line there, which is the 200-week moving average, has been holding pretty decently as support. Minor deviations. You did reject the 50-day here, very short term, but I love the flag that has been building in here on XLM. The major areas that are going to be causing some trouble is going to be the 100-day and the 50-week up here. That was already the case when we interacted with this here in May, as well as here at the middle of June. So if we kind of look a little bit further back here, this looks extremely accumulative. This is starting to look more like this was some sort of left shoulder, maybe a head, maybe a right shoulder in here. You pair this with the flag that's been building in here. You know, I really, really am very bullish on the general structure of what XLM is offering right now. When you look at this up in here, that key support, yes, you did get a minor test in there, but that was also followed by a huge liquidation candle. So that imbalance there at 35 cents, I think, is very likely to get taken out. This is going to be the biggest area of interest that's going to give us trouble if we're, you know, as we interact with it. But breaking over that opens up a very easy swing trade from 25 cents to 35 cents if we get the breakout back test soon enough without tagging that 35-cent zone first. So love what we're seeing here. I'm just going to flip really quickly over to the ONDO chart just so you guys can see the similarities. Although, again, ONDO created new lows, but the structural situation here is identical. In fact, ONDO's a little further along in its breakout with the breakout backtest into the 90-day range. So these highs in here matter, of course. Support, resistance, resistance. This flag in here looks eerily like what we're seeing with XLM right now. Just resting right on top of that previous breakout level. And you saw a breakout, backtest, breakout, and now I'm watching for another backtest in here. I think we might pull back here on ONDO a little bit towards this area right here, towards like 37, 38 cents. We're asking for like a couple pennies here. I don't think that's unreasonable, but I think that XLM is right about here. I think XLM is right here within this, you know, general schematic that we see is nearly identical. I think that XLM is somewhere right about here, close to the equivalent of like a 29, 30 cent ONDO price. So I think there's probably a little pullback required in here. If we were to take all this away and we bring our Fibonacci in off of our flag, you guys can see we're up into that 618 in there. That's a crucial pocket. So again, that 50% or even the 382 are two very good areas of interest to consider entries. The top of range in here are going to be the 50-week moving average at 50 cents. You guys can see that 1.618 for a short-term target at 60 cents there. So I know we're not doing this as an ONDO analysis, but when you kind of consider them, and if you were to like flip this side by side here, and I were to take in our XLM chart that we just looked at, it's not on my list. One second. Go to the aggregated chart. Zoom that up for you guys a little bit. So we got ONDO on the left side there. I know some of you guys are on tiny screens. You guys can rotate on some platforms from what I understand. It's really no different, right? You just have a more clear and clean breakout on ONDO from that flag where you just haven't seen that behavior out of Stellar yet. So I'd recommend you guys pay attention to the opportunities that haven't cracked yet and not chase the ones that already have cracked. In fact, I turned my ONDO DCA off for that exact reason. Awesome. What else we got, guys? With Soxon, just curious if you have any information on XLS-65 and XLS-66 lending protocols for the XRPL. As far as I understand, they're just still pending enough votes. You need sufficient votes in order to pass an amendment, and we haven't reached it yet. I haven't seen any major news. I've been I follow a couple of people on X that are pretty consistent about sharing any meaningful updates in relations to XRP amendments, and I haven't seen anything come across my radar. But I'm paying attention. I absolutely will be covering that when we do get some more developments there, or if there's a proposal that's pushed to replace the existing language in those amendments. Thing about amendments, obviously we're voting on them, but we're voting on solutions. And obviously everyone, there's lots of different coders and lots of people who run test and sandbox environments, and everyone's going to have different testing methods. So the reason that we have this democratic process is to make sure that enough people are testing in enough different ways and feel comfortable enough with the products in front of them without, with a very small tolerance for failure, right? And making sure that there's routes for that failure and that doesn't result in exploits or weakening the existing protocol that XRPL isn't itself right now. Avon, am I only the one who's been DCing into Casper for the past 4 years? No, I was definitely as well. I just started again with Kraken here. And it's nothing crazy. I bought a couple limits today and yesterday, but I first of all, I'm glad that we have U.S. access. The limits are feeling so much tighter. I filled it as ask and then post only, and it's execution is pretty good balance and pretty cheap there. I really didn't spend a lot in fees. Obviously, withdrawing is going to cost money, but I've been very happy with that. But yeah, I was on heavy DCA via Uphold for a long time. Obviously wish that maybe it started my DCA a little bit later, but it's can't tell the future, right? I could have also gotten discouraged with my Zcash DCA and turned that off, and I certainly did not, and that's paid out nicely. So yeah, it feels like it's been a long time, but I hope we get something nice here soon. It really costs very little money market cap wise for us to get a nice move back into some key support. Great. Yeah, let's take a look at a couple other charts, guys. And again, if you guys like this type of research, chart work, analysis, come check us out at cryptocharge.com. This is a Monday through Friday thing. This is not something that we do as a hobby. I think, Gavin, what are we at? 1,100 plus episodes now on cryptocharge.com. It really is something that I take a lot of pride in and something I'm very passionate about. So if you guys are tired of, someone selling you coursework, someone selling you the next best token, and you guys just want to even understand your own investments better and how to manage them better, come check us out. Discord's included. You guys get 30 days free with code YouTube. So a couple of charts that I think that are interesting right now as well. When we take a look here at the Solana chart, Solana's done a decent job here of breaking out and trying to backtest on top of the 50-day moving average. I'm very impressed with the flagging structure that's been building in here. I'm going to close this here really quick so you guys can see a little bit more closely. It's not as big of a flag or violent as a flag as we saw on XLM or as we saw over on ONDO, but this is the right type of price action that is building the higher low and they're building the accumulation. And these were very important lows in here that were broken. That was a huge break. We saw resistance, and this breakout and this attempt to backtest that on top of the 50-day is really impressive. So I am watching Solana as one of those potential leader positions. This does open up Solana, if this support is maintained, for another 20 to upwards of 27% room to the upside. And that could still even fall in line with someone's bearish theory. If someone wants to be bearish on the market, you'd kind of have to be very ignorant to say like that's not a very real even ABC correction theory up into those major areas of interest up in there. I also wanted to show you guys the Intel play. If you guys haven't been paying attention, some of the chip market has been way too hot in my opinion. Intel had a big break here. So over here on Friday last week, we broke below our key support as well as the 50-day breakdown, back testing the 50-day. You broke down here, saw a little bit of a relief rally. I think that Intel has more room to the downside. I'm watching for these double tops in here potentially get taken out closer to like 70, but I'm willing to scale in as early as 80. But I think this is a fantastic opportunity for those of you guys who saw the chip trade really start to pick up heavy. It's not going away, right? If you guys are into AI at all, if you guys use AI modeling, especially if you guys use it in a workflow and you're not using it like a glorified version of Google, you understand how impactful and powerful these models are getting and how much they consume. And this chip market, I think, is going to continue to remain elevated for quite some time. So I'm looking to get a long-term entry here in Intel, scaling to 80, scaling as low as like 68, 70. I think there's great long-term gains to be had with something like Intel. Winsox, any thoughts on Boundless ZKC being tested as the privacy coin on the XRPL? Low circulating supply, hoping it gets fully adapted. I own a little, just hoping to make profit in the next few years. So let's flip over to CoinMarketCap and just get a quick little bird's eye view on what's going on here. So the ticker was once more ZKC. let's get a little pulse on this here. So market cap 13 million. It's small. It's a little smaller than API 3, but playing in the same ball field as API 3, playing, within 50% of the realm of Casper right now. So definitely small enough market cap for things to happen. Circulating supply 309 million, total supply a billion. So there definitely is supply overhang. Want to figure out where that supply overhang sits. Is this on a very big vest schedule? Max supply is infinite, which means that there's likely some sort of inflation that's associated with the protocol. But this is a pretty big delta in overhang. So need to figure out where that is. See if on the website here it gives us any quick insights. Boundless turns overlooked GPU capacity into reliable AI infrastructure, so the cost of intelligence is no longer limits what teams can build. This is something I think that Render was really trying to achieve first in the ERC20 token. Now I believe it's over on Solana, but essentially utilizing DPIN, right? So DPIN and unused hardware that's sitting idly. Obviously, power is still a component of it, but lots of people do have good machines and they don't touch them for 8 to 10 hours a day, and they could definitely be offering that. Zero knowledge proofs, form of cryptography, so computationality demands was too long, treated as impractical. So to remove that barrier. Sourcing GPUs. Yeah. Okay. So they're just really kind of trying to aid in what they think is like the issue with limited hardware, right? And that does play back, I guess, into what I was just saying about Intel. If you think about it, is really that there is just too much demand and not enough hardware, which is why, unfortunately, poor little teens that want to build their very first PC are paying $500 for 16 gigs of DDR5, and it's either your parents love you or it's not happening. But it sucks, right? And even if you have to repair your own computer, I was having some weird computer issues this week, and I was like, I swear to God, if it's hardware, I'm literally just going to jump out the second window. Curious though, really quickly on Boundless Network tokenomics. Sometimes the white paper is good, sometimes it's not. There we go. See if this loads in. It's taking a super long time to load. All right, let's take a look here at the chart. And we might have to come back to this at a later time, but if you jump in the Discord, very much happy to take a deeper look for you and even cover it on our show. We try to prioritize anything someone's interested in on our live show. Ticker was once again ZKC, sorry. All right, we've got Coinbase, probably the best listing. Eek. September of last year. What do we get for crypto.com? About the same. I'm just gonna double check. No, those are DeFi. I'm just gonna go with the Coinbase chart. That's probably the most liquid chart. Wow, that's rough. You've had some stopping points along in here. It hasn't been just a complete straight down line, but it hasn't been pleasant. Casper certainly had much longer blocks of valuation than this. When did we launch here? September? Yeah, bad market timing. That sucks. It really does. It's like all the people that like did a bunch of market research and like, saved up all their money and like started a business in like 2019, and then COVID hit. Like, didn't matter how good your idea was. Like, the economy just crushed everything. There's a few areas of interest here on the chart that I think are interesting. You guys have this major key support in here that needs to be recovered. You did wick it over here in the middle of June. Today, basically, you also came up and wicked into that. Wow, what a big FU candle. Market makers just retrieving liquidity immediately back below the 50-day. But I unfortunately also know what that feels like with Casper. This in here is our pivot zone. That would be above this band in here. I wouldn't say that this is something that's showing that there's immediate signs of recovery. You've been making lower lows in here. If this ends up being more rounded and you get this break back into this band, that's when I would say, okay, you have like more confirmation based additions in here. So it's either DCA cautiously underneath this 6.6 cent level, or wait for the break back into this 6.6 cent level, start to set some limits in there, and start to add on the way up into these major pockets once you have a little bit more confirmation. So I see that this chart does have potential to recover at least into some blocks. Some charts truly are just with just such limited little blips and no sideways consolidation at all. At least we have some sideways consolidation here. It's very limited, so I would say either DCA with incredibly high fundamental confidence, or wait for this confirmation move here. Awesome. Great. Let's also take a look here at a couple other charts that I just think are interesting for you guys to consider right now. One of the charts that I think is probably most overlooked on the short-term basis, hey, you're most welcome, Winslow, is going to be Cardano, and just one of the biggest sweethearts of previous cycle, right? Everyone could not get enough out of Cardano. You guys can see here that key support at 24 cents is going to be a major area of interest that we broke below, and then you had key support over in here. Okay, so these here around 10 cents to 15 cents. It's a very important area of interest here from 2019. We built a super important accumulative base, broke out of this W, back tested, and then saw some really nice price action to the upside here. So with this breakout though, what you actually didn't do was fully backtest this previous topping structure in here. This was good that we came into this, little retrace high in here, but this accumulative range here was built for much longer with much higher levels of rejection and a lot more tests between 10 and 15 cents than we spent, doing this small topping structure from price discovery in 2018. So when I saw this multi-year level break in here, because we held 24 cents from December of 22 all the way through April of 2026. When I saw that break, I was like, I don't think we're stopping until 15. It's pretty much baked into the cake. We took a leverage trade here, ended up putting the stop loss up in profit, stopped out in profit. I've re-entered. I'll put the details in the Discord here for you guys here sometime soon. And the 50-day here is likely to get tested, so I might even add to this position. But the fact that this was broken in here with no retest. Sorry, guys, I moved over to the TradingView app, so things are just like 3% out of the place that I'm expecting them to be. This key support up in here at 24 cents that was broken needs to, at the minimum, be retested. This is a very classic accumulative shape that you guys are seeing here. This down in here, this is 100% queued up to test that area of interest. And if this is an inverse head and shoulders, which is what it looks like right now, left shoulder head, right shoulder foaming right now, and you have this up here as your neckline, what you would expect really is probably bigger than our target. If we were to measure from the head to the baseline here, that's 35%. So 35% up puts us right around, what was this, 25 cents? So I'm targeting 24, you could target 25 cents. It all aligns very closely here. So this is a very easy trade. If you guys don't have a leverage trading platform, I use BitUnix. You guys can grab a code out of my Instagram for that, my verified Instagram, and you guys get a little deposit bonus as well. If you guys are trying to grab a little bit of USDT. But that's one of the trades I'm looking at right now that I think that you guys should consider if you guys are looking at a swing trade. Even if you want to do a spot swing trade, still very low risk. Because I look at the downside here. Downside is maybe like 8 to 10%. That's the downside risk. 8 to 10% of downside risk to key support with 30, 35% upside potential with a major gap up there that's technically supported. You don't get a ton of charts that develop like this on the daily that offer these like higher confirmation probability setups. Cardano is doing it right now. So I know that the percentage maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but if you guys size the position correctly, use your stop loss correctly, you guys can get a really, really good potential reward with a good risk reward ratio without risking a lot of your own margin. One thing that I am continuously DCAing into right now, and this is probably a good example of what we just talked about, where like, with Boundless, right? Like it's certainly not in recovery mode. We have a lot more price history here on HNT. I took my foot off the gas with HNT for a while. ONDO broke, so I turned ONDO off. HNT is still on in here, and it's been developing new lows. I really do not have any good foundational reason why HNT is doing what it's doing right now. There was really big news with Noble Mobile acquiring the for-profit Helium. Activity and network activity still remains in the decentralized network. Big changes with the tokenomics that really allow for, instead of just paying for a proof of coverage, paying for amount of gigabytes actually offloaded. To me, it's been nothing but improvements in the general fundamental picture for HNT. So this is one of those that I'm kind of just getting a little spicy with right now, and I'm just DCAing, even though this really doesn't sit in a lot of like the technical rules where I'd be like, yeah, Matt, this is what you would advise somebody else to do right now. I already own HNT. I'm lowering my average. 19-20 cents is ridiculous. This here has not been retested at 86 cents, so can't promise that things don't get choppier or uglier in the short term. But that's a very likely area to get retested in there. So if you're looking for maybe a Hail Mary turnaround trade, HNT is one of those opportunities, in my opinion. The ROI, or the percentage from current market to that major area of interest, is like almost 450, 500% right now. So you get a break over that level, we're having a completely different conversation, and I don't want to hype something up that hasn't made that recovery yet. But HNT fundamentals as a deep end project are still very strong, equivalent to what we were just kind of talking about with Boundless. But we do have more price history in here that shows very easy trades that we can be taking. If we were to get the recovery over 110, I can drum up trades all day long in here that really don't require as much mental gymnastics and convincing to get yourself into. This is capitulation. This is relentless downtrend. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. So just keep that in mind if you guys want to get involved with something like that. As far as the rest of the market right now, guys, I've been looking at, the Bitcoin price chart, also showing the potential here of getting that inverse head and shoulder that offers some really nice moves towards the imbalance for 73, 75K. We talked about Ethereum. I also have been paying attention to the Ethereum Bitcoin pairing. When you look here on the Binance chart, that's also showing that there's been a big shift since really here of mid to late June in how we've seen strength behave in the market. When this pairing obviously is moving up and this ratio is moving up, that means that Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin in strength. That doesn't mean that the market can't turn over in dominance favors and you can still see this ratio go up, but we've seen the market recovering. So seeing this ratio settling above 0.028 is very, very encouraging to me. Last things I will probably mention here on the stream, unless you guys have any more questions for today's session, crude oil is something that I'm really just blown away by the gymnastics that Trump has been playing with the oil market and the market as a whole, but especially the oil market. We saw oil peak out, come out to these previous highs here from 2022. What happened though here that's not so great for us as consumers is that this level that we broke out from, I'm just going to zoom left here so you guys can see a little bit more. This level has mattered to the market for the WTI crude market since 2006, right? If you look at the first step here, it's actually in 2005. We have seen such strong support and resistance between like $66 and $75 so many times in 2010 here. Look at all the upper bounds of support here in 2012. You lost it here in 2014. Start retesting it here in 2018 again. This bound all the way here through 2020. Support, broke below it, right? Started to spend some time. And we saw over here in March of this year, a massive breakout. So as that little distribution structure came in, what really happened? This breakout here was confirmed as a very strong, potentially long-term oil breakout because you didn't just drop below key support in there and just start treating it as resistance. You've shown huge V-bottom behavior, tested all the major MAs, the 200-week, the 50-week, the 100-day, pushing up into the 50% fib in there. We still have opportunity for this to turn over here between 103. If this is just a classic breakout backtest and resistance, this is a monster flag that forms in here, oil could hit 150 and beyond here, no problem. And especially if it's paired with the macro. I'm pairing that with two other fundamental charts that I've been tracking very closely here. The dollar DXY has also broken a year-long range here in June. Saw the breakout, saw the flag in here, pushing over the 100-day. Dollar looks like it wants to rip towards 104.5. 200-week up here at 102.6 has not been tested since we broke below it here in April of this year. Dollar looks very bullish, and the 10-year is also just blazing. No regard for anything. Blazing. We're seeing that this long-term accumulation from 2025 all the way through this year, been building higher highs and higher lows every time. If you guys back this out here, you guys can see the 10-year has been aggressively climbing. You guys can see here these higher lows since March of this year, April, here in June, higher highs. We just breached a new higher high in here. So we might see a little pullback here tomorrow and the next day over on the 10-year, or just tomorrow because tomorrow is Friday. And that should be the area that we backtest in there, but yields are really high right now. Oil looks like it wants to move extensively higher. The dollar is picking up simultaneously, and we're seeing a pullback and a little bit of risk on right now. The difference is we're seeing crypto do a little bit more of like that macro bottom behavior in the charts where equities were already kind of lofty and really needed a pullback. That's the only puzzle piece that really isn't fitting as cleanly for me right now. It doesn't bother me so much that those three more macro charts that we just discussed are rallying in unison. But those are some of the things I'm paying attention to in the markets right now, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining our second super stream here. It's a lot of fun. We're going to be doing this again if you guys are interested in tuning in for these. These are going to be Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to be doing these at 2 p.m. Pacific. We go live on our website though, Monday through Friday. We have, again, engagement in our Discord there. Friday is technical tune-up Friday on our website. So if you guys have picks, charts, stocks, stocks, crypto, ETFs, whatever it is, if it comes up on TradingView, we will take a look at it there for you guys. And we're also introducing our very first version of this segment this coming Friday called Crypto Hotline. So do our market analysis, and then we will open up the phone lines for people who want to join the chat, and you guys can actually call in, and we will hear your questions live, chart requests live, maybe a little bit back and forth if the question is good quality. And I'm very excited for that, and still finish out with our Tactical Tune-Up Friday segment. So you guys have the opportunity to be a part of that. That is for members only. At cryptocharge.com, you guys get 30 days free with code YouTube. And you guys get the opportunity from there to have a 50% discount if it's a program that you guys enjoy. But hopefully some of you guys over there, some new faces in the Discord, and maybe join our very first crypto hotline segment. Thanks so much.